This afternoon session is called Present and Future, and we are going to have 5 speakers, and I think all the talks are on the computer. So, the first talker is already here. It's Marcos Montiveros, and he's talking about analogic to digital, concrete shells, morphogenesis from Candela to nowadays.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi everybody. I didn't say it yesterday. My English is not my better knowledge, so I hope you can be nice with that. I want to talk about first of all.
Está puesto ahí. No está puesto.
Okay. First of all, I want to talk about our specialization on design of language structures, because it's the space or the academic space for the rest of the talk. In the Unam, we have a program for 1 year studies between the bachelor degrees and the master degree. And it's the small group of academics, but I think we are the best people for that. And try to spread the ideas of Candela. Our shell builders teachers, the principal one from is Fernando Lopez Carmona, sadly died a month ago, and Juan Antonio Fonda, he passed away 2 years ago, but we still, our Professor José Luis Rincón, the youngest builders, shell builders in our teachers group. But we and try to form a new group. The professor, followers, teachers, right there. Evidently, Coordinación del Cuento, here with Lopez Carmona and carrying a Candela book, and the others, the professor like me, who was in our time students of this great field. First of all, we need to spread the ideas of Candela. We need to define a shell, and sadly, in nowadays we talk about shells, but not historic shells. We in a lot of magazines and books today we can find this kind of free shells. In this case, the Rolex Learning Center, and when Manfred Roman in one ESS told about that, about this building, he told us this curved concrete construction should not be called shells in the historical sense of the structures, but actually it's called shells. A lot of others possibilities named shells, but our shells are curved surface with one dimension significantly smaller than the other two, with in formal passive solid and rigid shells is not like tensile net or fabric structures. And we need to carry compressive stress with a bottom, so we need some thickness, small one, but some for that. Well, it's a continuous surface or discrete elements. With that, the answer, the question is, who is the responsible to define that cover? Sadly, we try to avoid this thing that the architect is responsible for the shape and the engineer is responsible for the structures. This is not a good thing. George Sly said, the more that the form of a building or structure develops, form its flow of forces lowers the responsibility to engineers. So if we try to work engineers and architects in the first steps of the project, we can reach this goal, this slash goal. And Candela, one of his kind, combined the academic education in architecture with a very good knowledge in mathematical and structural and construction topics, and with that integrate one methodology of design, analysis, and construction. Already Jose Luis Rincon talked about that. And in the classroom, Lopez Carmona told us about when Candela found the hyperbolic paraboloids, he found the natural shape of the reinforced concrete material. And that is the spirit who we try to do to our students. We have three types of geometric shells. Mathematical one is the Candela approach, with the practical topics about the calculation, analysis, and fabrication purpose. Reform, like a Salinen or Sahadid approach, when the shells is not very efficient, and the form found like Gaudi, Otto, Isler, and you know about that. Candela select the parabolic, hyperbolic, because it can made in forward with a string pieces, with a morphogenesis, a geometric morphogenesis, with a like a translation surface or a roulette surface. You can do both in a hyper. And still about not only the geometrical morphogenesis is used for a parabolic hyperbolics. You can use non-geometric modes of generation, and you have one geometric one shape that have a very good mechanical performance. It's like you find the eye part in a bubble scheme or in a pre-stressed cable net. But even more of that, yesterday I remember one speaker talked about the first gears from Candela. He built a lot of kinds of shells, not only the eye part, but when he found the eye part, he loved it because, like Jose Luis Rincon said, 2 hours later, he found the clever possibility to transform the equation of the for the axis, the orthogonal axis of the I part, found the natural axis, the oblique axis for the I part, and with that passed for this equation to this equation, and could be find the membrane stress in a simple way possible, in a time when the computer is not our tool. No, so with this simple and clever idea, he can use nomograms templates for finding the stress in the I parts. This is the Paraboloides Hyperbolicus book by Juan Antonio Tonda, and in this book explain all the calculation that Candela's calculation teach he, and it's a lot of this kind of patterns, and so you can draw the plant in a paper, or translucent paper, and put in this pattern, and you can find the stretch in each point of your plants, and well, and you could make a easy, calculation. So when I was the student in the specialization in the last century, with that knowledge, like Jose Luis Rincon do with a Excel file, I write a list program for AutoCAD to find the shape and make the calculation with this equation, membrane equation. But now we tried in the university, in this particular part of the university, try to be in our time using the new tools like rhinoceros, rhinobout, grasshopper, kangaroo, caramba, for learn from the past to build a better future. And in the sky, this is a workshop. One image from the workshop from 2 years ago, for 2 years ago for Tonda, for Remember Tonda, and we analyzed the Parroquia del Divino Niño, the church built Tonda and Professor Rincon, and understand the implication of change form, or parameterize only the geometry and see the analytic, mechanical analytic. Sorry. But not only concrete shells. We try to understand all the picture about the light web structures using this kind of the approaches, the bubble skin and the parametric design. Of course, our parameters are about the structural efficiency, not only the aesthetics issues. So, in one class, in one topic, in our specialization, the students must design a pavilion need design of pavilion, and this is one of for the dead for the Day of the Dead, designed with Renovald. And we learn about the thickness this material is a plastic, rigid plastic, but very small. So we need to put some grips for carry the shape. But it's part of the learning. And this kind of shapes too, for designed with Renovald too, for experimental brick shell that we want to build it in the first months in the next year. And some like this is a great shell for a house for student design. We have authors, ex-students who try to build shells, concrete shells, but it's not. I don't have right now the pictures, but when our students leave these years, they try to continue his investigation. But I want to show this steel shell. It's not concrete. It's steel. This is one of the last publication for EASS, and it's interesting because Michael Slash write about the form find is by an orange net model used in the markets in Germany for carrying orange, and this is the reflected wood, the strip of wood, try to push to over, and the net take the direction of the principal stresses, and with that, as a simple form finding process, build this beautiful bridge shell in this line. And the last one is this object doing by Sahadi. We know in Saturday this place, but this device. And we don't try to avoid the artistical and conceptual approach. I don't like this kind of approach, but it's only my opinion. But I think if we can merge the artistical conceptual approach and a technical conceptual approach, maybe we can do something between that with a very nice aesthetics and with a performance, a mechanical performance, a good mechanical performance. So this is the exoskeleton, the skeleton, and there are one of our students and the researchers of Zurich working, and the first layer of concrete is very clever possibility for that kind of construction proceeding, and the funny thing here is that the plumb, the Zurich plumb broke and is done work very well. So we need to finish this concrete shell like Candela finished their own with a work man or people. So it's funny that, and the object is a nice, I think. And it's not only one object in a museum, but it's also a possibility for other kinds of shells, of concrete shells. This is one of the blood research group in the same way to do this Nick Candela. He do this in her facilities, and well, it's a possibility, no? And well, this is our student, one of our students. Maybe it's one here, yes. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Marcos. Interesting talk on digital methods doing shells. Thank you. Next talker is going to be Wilfried Echer. He's going to talk about Candela-Isler-Müther revisited. His shells should definitely be preserved, but not at any price.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for showing that lovely bridge in Switzerland, which I photographed for my channel, as you have seen. It's a bit difficult to be nearly the last of the round of one conference. Everything has already been said, but not yet by everyone. Now I start to be one of the last. And another thing before I begin, I'd like to express my thanks to Nicholas Grindel in Berlin for translating the following presentation into English. Candela-Isler-Müther revisited. In 1999, the German weekly newspaper Die Zeit asked a number of journalists writing on architecture to contribute pieces about specific buildings for a feature on post-war modernism in East Germany. This request concerning an underexplored field on German architectural history also landed on my desk. At the time I was editor-in-chief of Deutsche Bauzeitung, a specialized periodical for architects and engineers. We were asked to choose one building from a list to write about, as well as individual buildings like Palast der Republik in Berlin and whole streets like Karl-Marx-Allee in Berlin and Pragerstraße in Dresden. The list included the Teapot in Warnemünde on the Baltic coast. The Teapot caught my attention, and I would very much ask one of you helpers to give this 4 legs table a stable position. It's very irritating. Okay. The best would be the tripod, but it's a 4-part.
Si no, dale la vuelta mejor. Dobla las.
The teapot caught my attention immediately. At the time, this concrete shell made of 3 hyperbolic paraboloids, hyper for short, was entirely unknown to me, which is precisely why I chose the teapot, as it gave me the chance to discover something new in a field I was otherwise familiar with. How could it be that this elegant structure was largely unknown? I had spent several years as an assistant lecturer at the Technical University in Braunschweig. More specifically, I had worked for Professor Walter Henn, known worldwide for his books on industrial architecture and structural design. At his institute, I prepared and ran seminars on topics in structural design. Each semester, the seminar had a different focus. Once it was high-rise buildings, then large column-free halls, and one semester it was suspended roofs, concrete shells, and other structures permitting large spans. Of course we knew Felix Candela and the Swiss shell builder Isler and the Italian Pierluigi Nervi and the Spanish structural engineer Eduardo Torroja, as well as Robert Maillard, Fritz Leonhard, Jörg Schleich, Christian Meng, Franz Dischner, Thomas Telford, Freysinet, and so on and so on. But we did not know Ulrich Müther, the master shell builder of East Germany. This photograph, taken in 2006, inside of the lifeguard tower at Cimis. In the history of architecture as written in the West, Müther simply didn't figure. From an ideologically blinkered Western perspective, there could be nothing of substance behind the so-called Iron Curtain, beyond the standardized slab-built apartment blocks that were scornfully and arrogantly dismissed as Plattenbau. That was all. It is worth remembering how long it took even for someone like Vladimir Zhukov to be probably recognized by a history of architecture and civil engineering that still has a long way to go before it can call itself a world history of architecture and civil engineering. Jürgen Jüdecke, one of Germany's most important architectural historians, along with Julius Bosinger and Winfried Nerlinger, also fails to mention Ulrich Müther. But he can't be blamed for this, as his book on concrete shell structures was published in 1962, by which time Müther hadn't even finished his studies. Müther built his first hyperbolic paraboloid shell in 1963 as the roof over the multi-purpose hall with vacation facility Haus der Stahllager. You have seen it this morning. After the fall of the Berlin Wall, the hall was used as the breakfast room of the hotel Vier Jahreszeitung. Today, this early shell structure, barely documented in photographs, sadly no longer exists. Knowing this, I was all the more curious to find out more about Ulrich Müther's work, beginning with the teapot. here on a German postcard, East German postcard, with the lighthouse of Warnemünde. The name Teapot derives from a building that formerly occupied this site and has nothing to do with the form of this building. Before setting off for Warnemünde, I spoke to Müther on the phone. He told me how to gain access to the teapot, which by this time was in a poor state of repair, having been out of use for some time. At a specific spot, round the back by the dunes, I should push aside a sheet of plywood leaning against the wall to uncover a hole through which I could crawl inside. I was overwhelmed by the space that opened up. Here a panorama of the interior taken from the gallery. My short piece for Die Zeit was, of course, an enthusiastic call for the teapot to be preserved. After this episode, I knew the story was not over for me. As the next step, I traveled to Binz on the Baltic island of Rügen, because I very much wanted to meet this man who modestly referred himself as a regional architect. First of all, he took me to see the lifeguard tower, just a few steps from his house on the seafront. This picture shows Müther in front of the lifeguard tower in 1999. Then we went to the Hotel Vier Jahreszeiten, where he built his first shell in '63. And then on to the bus stop in Binz. This concrete shell, originally built as a test structure, was essentially the blueprint for many later buildings made out of combinations and variations of this original. For a time, the test structure was used as a bus stop and shelter. Then he showed me a space spanned by 4 shell sections, the restaurant Cimis. Then we drove to Barbe to see the suspended shell over the swimming pool of the Cliff Hotel. For future tours, he recommended that I visit the following: Island Paradise in Barbe, Baltic Pearl in Dover, the Music Pavilion in Cimis, the Multipurpose Hall in Rostock-Littenklein, the Exhibition Hall in Rostock-Schuto, the Catholic Church, and the Municipal Hall in Neubrandenburg. In the October 1999 issue of Deutsche Bauzeitung, I then published an article entitled Müther from Regional Architect to Shell Builder. In the meantime, my Müther tours had generated so much material, and especially photographs, that I was able to publish a still volume, this volume shown here, about Müther in the Deutsche Bauzeitung book series under the title Kühne Solitäre, which translates a bit as bold designs. Although the book very quickly sold out, the publisher was not sure whether there would be enough buyers for a second edition. In 2010, the Swiss publisher Nigli proved him wrong with a small, beautifully produced book about Müther's shell structures. Interest in his work seemed to be greater in Switzerland than in Germany in any case. In 2006, the magazine Tech 21 planned an issue on the shell builders Müther and Heinz Isler. This allowed me to revisit many of Müther's buildings accompanied by a writer from Tech 21. But one building we saw on this trip was new to me, the Borchtitz Youth Camp. We found the building in a pitifully ruinous state. It was hard to imagine that anything could be salvaged, an impression that later proved to be entirely mistaken. Which brings me to the Müther tours I made this summer, especially for this presentation. I was curious about the state of repair in which I would find these buildings. To begin with Borchtitz. What had been run down and ruinous in 2006, seemingly beyond repair, was almost unrecognizable. The Frankfurt businesswoman Sabine Reinhardt has converted the former dining hall on the youth camp into a spacious holiday home where she herself lives many months of the year. In the four corners, she installed cubicles for the bathrooms, bedrooms, and guest room. These additions detract slightly from the original design, but since the cubicles are built very low, the sense of space created by the roof, consisting of four thin shells, has been largely preserved. Müther revisited. I will now show you some of the buildings I revisited with pictures from 1999, 2006 and 2018. Before I start, I would say that the conclusion I have drawn is as follows. Yes, Müther's shells should definitely be preserved, but not at any price. I begin with those buildings that have been carefully restored, converted or renovated. Concerning the Cliff Hotel in Basel, Ulrich Müther had pointed out a small but very important detail. In order to highlight the fact that the roof is a suspended shell, he designed the place where it almost touched the floor to be made of acrylic glass. At some point, this transparent ring was replaced with stainless steel, which was fatal, as it reversed the apparent flow of forces. The solid stainless steel ring looks like the point from which a mushroom-shaped shell springs. And you see the same detail in the picture from 2006. Understandably, Ulrich Müther is not happy about this alteration. And had he lived to see it, he would surely have been very glad to see that this mistake was rectified last year. This is the picture I promised yesterday evening. The island paradise in Basel looked terrible. The mushroom shell was intact, but the light bulbs were all broken, the windows all smashed, the walls covered with graffiti, the ground floor windows boarded up. In 2006, the island paradise still looked just the same, as if time had stood still. But today, everything is like new. The island paradise has been carefully renovated, returned to its original splendor. It is back in use as an Italian restaurant. The owner, Francesco Galeano, is clearly a Müther fan. A large panel honoring the architect hangs in a prominent spot on the ground floor. The tribute doesn't bear much critical scrutiny. Ulrich Müther is barely recognizable in the portrait, and the Art Nouveau typeface is hardly fitting for a creative modernist architect. But what counts here are good intentions, and they are manifestly obvious. Lifeguard Tower in Linz, 1999. Originally there were 2 of those UFOs in Linz, but only this one has survived. Lifeguard Tower in Linz, 2006, just landed. Ulrich leaves the spaceship with the writer from Tech 21. If you look closely here, you can see that the previously straight steel stairway has a landing halfway down where it turns a corner. Today, in 2018, the Lifeguard Tower is used by the local registry office and is a very popular location for wedding ceremonies. These 2 people just came from Leipzig. That's just a far way to go. Just married, the steel staircase has been straightened up again. With support from the Audiovisual Foundation, whose main focus is on preserving modernist architecture, the spaceship was recently restored. The attractive new usage will ensure that the Lifeguard Tower in Linz will enjoy a long life. The Catholic Church in Brandenburg has an unexpected special qualities inside. Incoming daylight is used in such a way that the gently curved shell seems to float above the church. One thing becomes clear here. Wherever Müther's buildings have been used, loved and looked after continually since their construction, there is no need to worry about their state of repair. Municipal Hall in Neubrandenburg. Only on my most recent trip I have had the opportunity to see the interior. The Municipal Hall has been regularly renovated and is still used as a multi-purpose hall, mainly for sports but also occasionally for events. Once again, keeping spaces in continual use is the best way to ensure they remain in good repair. Rostock Schuto. The 2 hyper shells, only 7 centimeters thick, were installed back-to-back in 1966 as an exhibition hall. In 1999, the ensemble was in a bad state of repair. It was being used as a car dealership, half as a showroom and half as a bookshop. As a workshop. It looked as if the former exhibition hall was being worked into the ground, prepared for demolition by intensive and incorrect usage. But the ensemble now finds itself in an orderly, well looked after state. It is still being used by the same leaseholder. The large space with its sweeping roof is excellently suited to presenting cars. This is the best guarantee for the preservation of the building. It also ensures that it remains possible to view the curve of the 2 high-power shells, largely free of additional installations, even if one doesn't wish to buy a car. Music Pavilion in Sassnitz, 1999. In 2006, everything seemed to be in a deep sleep. In order to make an impact as a piece of architectural art, the Music Pavilion doesn't need a concert audience. The shell itself is a sculpture in its own right. In the meantime, the pavilion has been thoroughly restored, again with funds from the Wüstenrot Foundation. The restoration work is now complete. In the case of such a structure, there is no need to worry about its survival, nor about being spoiled by improper usage. The bus stop in Binz also deserved the status of an autonomous sculpture. In the intervening years, however, it has been crowded out by boring functional structures around. The 4 shells that cover the restaurant Szczecin were built in 1978. Here, one of the shells in detail. When we met, Müther said that the building was in serious danger of being demolished because the restaurant's operator wanted to rebuild. Now, it was not demolished, but its clear lines have since been totally masked and distorted by decorative elements. And an appalled Matthias Ludwig sent me this picture from a recent visit. The Baltic Pearl in Grove has a privileged location on the waterfront. Identical copies of this same 20 by 20 meter shell were built in Eberswalde and Hohenfelden. The architect was Karl Otto Möller. And as I've heard this morning, there exists a 4th example of this type as well. The building resembles the church of the West Señor de la Soledad in Coyoacán, built by Felix Candela in 1957. In 1999, the Baltic Pearl stood unused in a poor state of repair among a mess of wooden shacks, caravans, snack kiosks and souvenir shops. In 2006, it was under scaffolding, but the first visible changes already suggested worse to come. In this picture you can see the freestanding gallery, but that was soon a thing of the past. Now the shell structure can only be seen from the upper level, which is reserved for private functions. On the main restaurant, the ground floor, the shell structure can no longer be seen at all. The gallery has been extended and the space underneath is closed off, meaning the interior as a whole has far fewer sightlines. A pity, but at least these major alterations are not irreversible. The multi-purpose hall in Rostock-Lippe-Klein is made up of 4 hypershells. In 1999 it stood unused and in bad repair. Things have changed. The shell has been renovated and stuffed full of commercial tenants, drugstore, supermarket, pharmacy, offices. Entering the hall, via the main entrance, one finds oneself in the single-story supermarket that has been built inside. Small office spaces are reached via a newly installed gallery. On this raised level, one gets a sense of how the space as a whole might once have felt. But otherwise, the shell has been degraded to a mere shelter against the elements, visible as a distinct form only from outside. Of course, it's good that this 50-year-old building has been preserved as a whole in this way. And of course, the better, perhaps non-commercial usage was found at some point in the future, it would be possible to throw out all the supermarket stuff and make the shell structure visible again from inside. But the vague promise that architectural culture may one day assert itself against commercial pressure strikes me as too new. An approach to heritage conservation based on the lowest common denominator. I'm repeating myself. In the process of finding new users, accepting certain setbacks is better than facing demolition. But can you be satisfied with this? And in addition, it is by no means certain that such compromises will banish the threat of the wrecking ball. For the maple leaf in Berlin, even being given the status of a protected historic monument wasn't enough. In 2000, it was replaced by a banal 8-story hotel block. And why? Firstly, because real estate in central Berlin is subject to huge commercial pressure. Secondly, because Berlin's then Senator for Construction, Hans Stimmann, constantly waffled on about block perimeter development with a uniform height of 22 meters and had no time for East German architecture in any case. So the building was demolished in spite of strong protests that were backed by prominent architects and engineers. I began this tour of Müther's work with a teapot, and I'd like to end with it too. The teapot that so fascinated me back then no longer exists. You only have to look at its postal address to understand why the teapot has long since fallen victim to commercial exploitation. Seepromenade number 1, the seafront with the most valuable real estate in Warnemünde. In 2006, I climbed to the top of the lighthouse. From up there, you can still imagine the striking beauty of the curved space under the shell. This year, Germany's Federal Association of Engineers rightly listed the 50-year-old teapot as a historic landmark of civil engineering in Germany. But today, the shell's sweeping lines can only be appreciated from such a bird's eye view. The teapot is now surrounded by all manner of prefabricated shacks, and its setting, once a unified space, has been sliced up like a pie into souvenir shops, bars, kiosks, restaurants. Entering by this doorway, I could hardly believe my eyes. Here you can see the sad remains, or part of it, of the shell. Will it ever be possible to put this right again? The teapot belongs to the private investor Friedrich Kunz and his family foundation. Today it is once again badly in need to renovation. But the building's owner is only prepared to invest money if he is allowed to buy the land on which it is built. But in 1969, Rostock's town council voted, with good reason, to ban the sale of municipal land on or near the seafront. It is uncertain whether a way out of this extortion dilemma can be found. One can only hope that Rostock's town council doesn't cave in to pressure. I was originally planning to finish my Müther tour with the teapot. Instead, I would now like to end on a slightly more hopeful note with a find from my most recent Müther tour. The Catholic Church in Rostock was built by Ulrich Müther in 1971. I discovered it just recently, and I was delighted by its airy interior. Thankfully, there are still beautiful buildings to be discovered in Müther's extensive legacy. I'm glad to have had the chance to become acquainted with Ulrich Müther and his buildings. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Wilfried. Great talk, and thank you very much for doing all the work, taking photographs a long time ago and just recently once again. It was very helpful to see all the buildings like they are now in the moment. Thanks again. Okay, the next talker is going to be Igor Mikov. The title is Architecture as a Nature-Culture Dichotomy, the role of history of ideas in the post-war architecture.
Dear colleagues, I've thought a lot, and it's not very easy for me to speak now, but I'll try to speak as clearly as possible. My talk today is about the role of history of ideas in the post-war architecture, exemplified in practices of shared building by Heinz Isler. In the last 2 days, we often spoke about architecture as a three-dimensional phenomenon. But from my point of view, it's not enough to consider architecture only as a three-dimensional phenomenon. We necessarily need the fourth dimension, which I want to introduce in my talk. You will see that architecture is not only about solving equations, calculating forces, and choosing constructional materials. From the perspective of the humanities, architecture can even be seen, can even be thought as a nature-culture dichotomy, which especially applies to the Heinz Isler's work. Architecture and engineering are new research fields for me. I have a historical and philological educational background, and I've been a research fellow of the Vienna Doctoral Academy Theory and Methodology of the Humanities. So I deal with structural design only since October 2018, when I moved to Zurich. And now I would like to present my preliminary thoughts about my case study on Heinz Isler. After introducing my dissertation project and object of research, I will go to my preliminary research aims, materials and methods. Then, showing the importance of history of ideas for the post-war engineering, I will discuss philosophical roots and key concepts which inspired civil engineering, reception of philosophical ideas, and various entanglements between technology, engineering, design, and application. Now, a couple of words about my dissertation project. The preliminary title is Performing Nature towards Heinz Isler's experimental engineering. My starting point is that Isler should have had a coherent program of civil engineering, which he developed or improved during his whole life. It could also be possible that there was no concrete program, but I just need this term to conceptualize, classify, and analyze Isler's experimental engineering practices at this stage of my research. When this work will be done, the term can be easily crossed out. This is often the case in historical research. In my research, I focus on Ister's contribution to modern understanding of nature and its role in structural design by studying of his reception of contemporary ideas and their further usage for structural design and his influence in field of experimental architecture. The sources are original archival unpublished documents from the Heinz Isler's estate at the GCD archive at the ETH Zurich, and from a methodological point of view, I combine historical critical discourse analysis with the testing theories retrieved from the science and technology studies, especially influenced by such scholars like Luke Blitansky and Trevor Pinch. I would like to turn your attention to a very general question. For what purpose were shells actually built? Apart from their utilitarian functions, shells can be understood as a form of critique and innovation. On the one hand, this was a critique of contemporary engineering methods of the 1950s and 60s, which primarily used mathematical methods of shape finding, which led to aesthetically sufficient solutions only in rare cases. On the other hand, it was also a critique of contemporary aesthetics. Of contemporary aesthetics itself, which can be seen as an attempt to make the built environment better. In times of distancing from noise balance, new trends of structural design appeared. Concrete as constructing material became more and more popular, and the costliness and economy of buildings stood in the foreground. Shell building was a response to these contemporary developments, because shells require less constructing materials and are therefore cheaper to build. Moreover, they also have an aesthetic function, manifesting in their complex shapes. The incorporation of nature was an invention, so to say, by Heinz Isler, is that he wanted to make the built environment better. From this point of view, it is worth to investigate the complex relationships between traditions and innovations in civil engineering, their social prerequisites and impact on ways of knowing and dealing with natural phenomena, scientific facts, and so on. The research aims of my dissertation project are to investigate relations between scientific and artistic knowledge production from the perspective of history of the post-war construction engineering, to analyze contribution of a civil engineer Heinz Isler to contemporary nature aesthetics, to identify common practices of knowledge production, art and science, to explore aesthetic experience of engineers concerning the cultural construction of nature, to examine the role of dichotomic thinking in structural design, and last but not least, to investigate conceptual context of modern architecture. It should be mentioned already now that my future research results can only be valid for the Swiss architecture and Swiss engineering. It doesn't mean that they will be irrelevant for other countries, though there was an influence of specific Swiss discourses, and the developments made in the Swiss experimental architecture could only be possible in this social space and at that time. The social surrounding is therefore very important for developments in civil engineering. The my sources are publications of Isler's precursors and contemporaries regarding architecture, engineering, aesthetics and environment, religion and philosophy. Further, Isler's written and published notes throw light on his reflections about engineering, art and architecture. Last but not least, such sources as written correspondence and audiovisual media, for example, short videos showing Isler's experiments with nature, should be mentioned because they are a key for reconstruction of Isler's experimental engineering and its analysis in the framework of the nature-culture dichotomy. Isler understood itself as a keen observer of nature during his lifetime. He claims to have discovered most of his technical innovations through indications of nature. His approach was to find solutions by carefully observing nature's actions and reactions. He claimed that nature finds solutions by itself, and they only have to be slightly assisted by artificial means, by engineers. One should not copy nature, but should use it for the simulation of one's own imagination. So the productive imagination is very important for Heinz Isler. These statements made by Isler at numerous congresses of the International Association for Shell and Spatial Structures show that nature is in Isler's understanding more than a simple source of the inspiration. It has productive powers which can or should be used by engineers to make their constructions better. It requires the power of imagination to see the similarities between natural phenomena, Isler's simulations of nature, and creation of the real built environment. There are a couple of examples. You see a snail shell on the slide, and Isler's model inspired by this shell in the application of the model to the building practice, namely the Sickly factory in Cimis. At first sight, we won't be able to see any similarities between the three different entities. It shows that the ways of seeing should be learned. So Isler should have seen something different that we see now. It was not clear for me in which relation these three pictures stand, but it was very important for Heinz Isler, and I retrieved these pictures from one of his publications. It's not a product of my fantasy. He explained it so. If you put the snail shell, you would get other shapes of shells whose combination would lead to the model presented on the slide, and then the model became a real building. Another example is an experiment with a frozen cloth, when a hanging frozen shape is reused or recontextualized for purposes of structural design. Particular attention should be paid to improvements of natural constructions made by Isler, because they are an essential part of his understanding of the role of nature in civil engineering. Having seen some examples of the Isler's self-understanding, we should thematize the roots of his visions. In this context, it makes sense to speak about trade, nature, belief, and knowledge, established centuries before Isler by an English nature philosopher, Isaac Newton, also known as a physician. All of these three essential elements of the understanding of world can be found in Isler's engineering practices. Isler was strongly influenced by mysticism and the so-called Christian Science, inspired by the inaccessibility of nature. Isler considers nature as the Bible, like Newton. Through his dealing with the Christian Science, Isler came to the holistic approach towards structural design by performing and transforming natural phenomena, nature philosophy and aesthetics to models, and then the models to buildings. At the same time, there is a close connection between nature and religion, so Isler's experiments can be seen to some extent in context of Newtonian ideal of the observing nature as reading from the book of nature. The previous considerations have shown that nature is omnipresent in numerous fields related to Isler's engineering practice and interests. Many of them constitute themselves around the concept of nature. At the same time, engineering, as well as reading and writing books, observing, conducting research, building and so on, are artificial or cultural practices. For instance, calculating of forces appearing in Isler's models and various experiments in his laboratory have less with nature to do. However, many of the Isler's innovations in shape finding methods are based on observations of nature. It leads us to the question whether nature and culture really constitute a dichotomy. It should be said that this is only a weak dichotomy. Nature and culture are not absolute, but only relative antipodes, and cannot be divided clearly. In this sense, Isler's understanding of nature and its use for engineering purposes should be focused upon. But with which methods should it be done? My proposal is to use the history of ideas based on epistemology. It can be a useful methodical tool for investigating the complex relationships between the culture and the natural in Isler's engineering practices. Thus, Isler should be embedded in a thought style and a thought collective in which nature serves as a material dispositive. This sharing of common ideas, ideals and ways of thinking are therefore essential for understanding the shell building in post-war engineering. Such an approach enables to bridge social, philosophical and technical preconditions of shell building with innovations in engineering and structural design. The concept of the thought collective appears useful for investigation of culture of objectivity regarding shell building in the post-war period. As we have seen, the reception of natural phenomena and making of them to scientific facts require experience, or in other words, should be learned. It refers to Lorraine Deston's profound investigations about cultures of objectivity, and she says that objectivity has a history. There are no cultures of scientific objectivity which were natural. All the scientific facts have to be recognized, and they manifest themselves through social agreement. Applying the concept of thought collective, engineering and architecture appear both as a social and historical practice. There are no single genies, and knowledge production and establishment of new scientific facts and innovation happen within thought collectives, which share the same thought style, which even should or can be learned. At the same time, supposedly antiquated ideas have their afterlife and can decisively influence innovation processes. Thus, they are fit into new thought collectives. These pre-ideas are vague presuppositions which outlast the single thought styles. Such ideas are, for instance, that the natural is better than the artificial, that nature are more beautiful than artificial constructions, and has an unlimited creative potential. This is a pareidolia when the human ascribes certain values into nature which are not inherent for it. Considering the post-war shells builders as a thought collective, we can speak about the exchange of ideas across the globe. You see numerous names on the slide. And the most important pre-ideas within thought collective were that shapes for shells should have high aesthetic qualities and natural forms are better than artificial forms. The natural shapes for shells can therefore be reached by mimesis of nature, which aims at improving of the built environment. This improvement is a kind of catharsis in architecture, aiming at establishing of new, better nature aesthetics. The philosophical roots of such a view of engineering and architecture is based on works by Italian philosopher Benedetto Croce, who understood aesthetics as expression and distinguished between experiencing through intellect and fantasy. Following Croce, art is not only simulation of nature, but also its idealization. He was one of the first modern philosophers who linked art with the scientific knowledge production. The work by Darcy Thompson on growth and form was cited many times by structural engineers and therefore was an important step in introduction of natural structures into engineering from a biological point of view. Ernst Bloch dominated the post-war nature philosophy and considered nature as a force possessing creative productivity. The engineer using nature for his projects can be seen, following Bloch, as a god, the second creator. Karl Friedrich von Weizsäcker, one of the philosophers mostly read by Isler, underlines the unity of nature and claims its importance for understanding the world. The variety of natural shapes goes back, following him to the second law of thermodynamics. The application of the late Crocean philosophy can be found in the Eduardo Torroja's programmatic book Razones de los tipos estructurales, which was very influential among the shell builders. Exploring the nature-culture dichotomy in the post-war engineering, we easily find out another dichotomy between art and science. While science is experiencing the general rules of shell construction, art is focused on experiencing the individual characteristics of single shells regarding their aesthetic qualities. While science is dealing with solving engineering problems and shape finding, art is looking for expression and aesthetic pleasure. Because both technical and artistic aspects are relevant for shell building, there was a close collaboration between engineers, architects, and artists. Some of them were some of civil engineers were artists at the same time, like Heinz Isler. In the research literature, I could only find out one directional view of interconnectedness between art and science. It is spoken about the influence of technology on architectural creativity. From my point of view, it was a multi-directional process. So many fields like nature, philosophy, art, architecture, technology, engineering, structural design, and its application in concrete building projects were interconnected and influenced one another. We have two seemingly different logics of art and technology. In case of shell building, we have to deal with numerous complex analytical steps like shape finding, modeling, test and verification of models, experimentation, calculations, and so on. Apart from this, we have an artificial problem as to how impression, expression, and aesthetic pleasure can be translated into the language of physical phenomena. Although art considers natural laws for shell building as a kind of aesthetic astrology, they don't stay in a clear opposition to the strict and exact mathematical and physical laws. At that stage of my dissertation project, it would be too naive to make any conclusions, and instead of a conclusion, I would like to provide some closing remarks. It might appear that nature is omnipresent in Heinz Isler's engineering. It's not only a source of inspiration and an object of admiration. It gives him solutions for engineering, designing, and aesthetic problems. At the same time, the ways of dealing with nature developed by Heinz Isler remain to be more than artificial. Nature became a bridge between art and engineering in Isler's working practices because teleological staging and performing nature by an engineer produced works of art arisen as a result of numerous experiments with ice, cloth, and so on. These experiments led to discovering of seemingly natural shapes which have not existed before. We can consider these processes as a cultural appropriation of nature and translation of natural phenomena into engineering and their realization in socio-technical ensembles. I'm looking forward to your feedback, suggestions, questions, maybe protests against my approach, and thank you for your interest in
Very good. So, next talker is going to be Candela-Isler-Müther. The title of the talk is Safe at Last. The fate of Müther's Magdeburg hypershell in a changing society.
Okay, thank you. Thank you everyone, and very especially thank you, Diaz, Ludwig, for inviting me as part of the German group. Our connection goes back to our time in different moments in time. So I will try to make it as entertaining as possible, since it's the last one, and I think we should have some fun, because I will try to explain my approach, which is very much down to the ground. It's very much an approach that happened. It was not planned at all in my career to start from here, but it was an enormous opportunity that I certainly took it, and still marks my work. Just to mention, this was my first build work when I returned from Germany, and I will explain a little bit how it happened. Just to give a little bit of a wider framework, my office is called the Studio Producción Opera Pública. I say Bexting because I'm normally in the United States. I should say Fechstein. Opera Pública. And recently I am translating that into buildings and people. And I will explain a little more of that, which has to do with my topic of research, which has to do with public works and the relationship with communities. This is just a very, only a slide explaining what I mean by that, to understand what is the focus of what I'm trying to do in every work. I say opera pública, buildings and people, and translating that into academic language, it could be that on one hand we have the disciplinary craft of architecture, and on the other hand we have the public practice. That gives me a very nice double side entry to the problem of public works. On one hand, we have the architecture knowledge, the disciplinary knowledge, which is very much autonomous, and it moves forward through experimental approaches. But on the other hand, we have the main, the main purpose of architecture, which is the relationship to others. And that brings the collaborative aspect and basically the relationship to life. Yes, I will. Thank you. Opera pública, I took it from the Latin name used by the ancient Rome for the public works, the construction or engineering projects carried out by the state on behalf of the community. I'm trying to understand this little phrase and say, when public works are initiated, designed, approved, and built and brought back to the community, what happens in the middle? What happens from the individual, from the initial needs of a community that goes through all the political and participatory process and democratic process and so on, until it gets built and gets back to the community, where all these aspirations and dreams of the community are in those steps. That's what I'm very interested in every one of my works. Again, the autonomous part, so what belongs to architecture is the domain of the materials of architecture. I'm not saying the materials of bricks and concrete, I'm saying the materials of architecture, the materials that architecture works with every time it faces the project. The autonomous, the external part of this equation is the relationship to life. And then I call the craft of both the domain of the materials and the relationship to life, what I'm interested in, which is called, for me, opera publica. This is a little bit a summary of my main works, and I am going to focus on those two works. All the previous projects down here were projects, especially starting from Frankfurt, and works with Enrique Miralles in Barcelona, works back in Argentina that were mainly not built or partially built, and the first work that is properly built is actually the monument to Amancio Williams. The other one is 10 years later, and if we have time, which I don't think we will, because otherwise we will buy your seats, is one that I will probably leave for our next meeting in Berlin, and just to talk about what I'm doing today and what's the relationship with those previous works. So just to give you, because I noticed that literally, unless the Mexican side, nobody very much knew Amancio Williams and his work, I will give you a little bit of a background. Born in 1913, he died in 1989. When I finished my undergraduate studies in the School of Architecture in Buenos Aires, before that, when I started preparing my thesis, my theory thesis, I decided to do it on the work of Amancio Williams, and everybody say that he was no longer alive, and I discovered that he was not only alive but working. But that demonstrates that he was a very isolated and very special character. So I approached him and had several interviews. I made my paper, and after I finished my studies and decided to go to study in Frankfurt with Cook and later Enrique Miralles, I approached Amancio Williams for a letter of recommendation. He looked at my works and he asked me if I would stay in the office working with him for a while. And of course I accepted immediately. Anyway, I was accepted in Frankfurt, and I postponed 1 year, 2 years, 3 years before I went to Frankfurt. When I entered the office was a fascinating place in the basement of a phenomenal building built by Alexander Christopherson. And that was it. It was the models, the drawings, and Amancio Williams and myself. That was the office. So for a long time I had the opportunity to almost be, direct disciple of Amancio Williams, which was an extraordinary experience. I will go back to this picture to the right, which is a picture of that he took himself of the Rio de la Plata, which is a very particular landscape in Buenos Aires. The one on the left is taken by Horacio Coppola, a phenomenal photographer in Argentina, and reflects very much the nickname I gave Amancio, which was Comandante Spock. And that was his personality. He was really a mysterious guy, Every day Amancio had to go down the staircase to the basement, and I had to be there and receive him, the old master style that later I found the same, the same patterns when I saw videos by Frank Lloyd Wright and others. So this kind of personality of the pioneers and avant-garde of the 20th century. Here you could see this big contradiction. That's the house built by Alexander Christopherson for his father in Buenos Aires, a phenomenal palace. This is his father, Alberto Williams, who was the most prominent composer of classical Argentinian music, who was a sort of Bartok or the kind that made a phenomenal transposition between classical music and popular music of Argentina, especially the music of the gauchos and the pampas. So here you can see Alberto Williams. So the whole atmosphere was surrounded by art and by this highly elevated, cultivated family. Alberto Williams studied with César Franck in Paris. So Amancio Williams, his son, carried the name of Amancio Alcorta, a former president of Argentina, just to give you a little bit of a background. And this is the basement of one of his offices that he had. Later he moved into the other one. This is a little bit to understand also his past. Very well taken care of kid. Amancio decided to study engineering. He did some years in engineering, and later he abandoned it and decided to start flying his own flying airplanes. Actually, he conducted the welcoming of the Graf Zeppelin to Buenos Aires in an airplane, while his family didn't know about it. They knew because they read the name in the newspapers. Just to give you an idea of the kind of adventurous spirit of Amancio Williams. Always thinking about, this elevated man in the middle of the clouds. This is with a sculpture of Ennio Leoni, a prominent Argentinian sculptor. Very prolific, not only in architecture, but 8 kids. Still, the family is extremely united around his work, as he was with the work of his father. Amancio had a really, really prominent place in Argentinian culture. Even though he almost didn't build anything, he became the most important architect in Argentinian modern architecture. Here you could see him with presidents, with Juscelino Kubitschek, the president of Brazil at the time of Brasilia. He was presenting a project there. Indira Gandhi, Roberto Burle Marx, Walter Gropius. Walter Gropius, just to give you an idea, did a project together with Amancio for the German embassy in Buenos Aires that was not built. And Walter Gropius stayed in Amancio Williams' house for more than a month. And other personalities like Reginald Malcolmson in the US and so on. It's very impressive how Amancio was able to portray himself as this figure that didn't need to build. He was so idealistic that really rejected many times to build, but to move forward his ideas and put them in documents. This is more the Amancio Williams I met. He died at 73, relatively young. This is the Amancio Williams I met. He was very warm, even though I always saw him as Commandant Spock. Every time we finished the month, and he was also paying me, which was a miracle for that kind of people. And every time he gave me a payment at the end of the month, he said, "Now you can go and have an ice cream," because for him that was the amount he was giving me, but for me it was the whole month. So anyway, this is a projection of Amancio Williams. He did many portraits of himself. This is one of them, with a section of a building that you will see in a moment. So Amancio Williams, as I wanted to give you the impression of this kind of idealism behind his personality. And suddenly he met this guy called Claudio, like his son, Claudio Williams, who was the only one that studied architecture but never finished, and I think that's probably why he hired me. And suddenly this became this couple that for a while pushed the works forward in silence in a basement. And this was the guy that suddenly appeared in his studio at that time. So it was a very strange couple. So I represent the down-to-earth guy against idealism in his work. And we'll see the benefits of that. So these are just a framework for you to have a little overview of the first works, 1942, after he briefly studied architecture. He started playing with these sections that he called sections in space, for housing, what he called housing in space. He had this very interesting relationship between the high-tech or the high-profile architecture, avant-garde that he had in mind. And on the other hand, he was doing these drawings with watercolors, which was quite funny. And always putting his family there, which is also another very interesting point, you know. You always think of the avant-garde guys, this solitary person and so on. He was always, even though he portrayed himself as this solitary person, he was always surrounded by his family, especially in the drawings. He always extended these drawings to very large scales related to the landscape of Argentinian pampas. He was fascinated with the pampas and the horizon in Argentina. So this was a project he did for Peru, commissioned by the architect president of Peru, this is a project he did, and you will see the times, 1942, 1953 for one project. Okay, he carried them over, even though the clients always abandoned him after a year or something like that. He didn't care at all. He kept going with the project and making experimentations. This is the different spectacles that he was imagining for the place. It was not about real theater or cinema. It was about new spectacles with laser, with sounds, and so on. And then placing it somewhere. There were no locations in most of these projects. For instance, this project was suddenly somewhere in a park in Buenos Aires, or suddenly in the Rio de la Plata, the River Plate in Buenos Aires. But then when I went so I worked with him for a while, and then we started working on a book, and then suddenly he died, and the family commissioned me to continue with the book, and that was when I was 20-something years old. And this is the second version of the book. This is the paperback. The other one is completely sold out. So if you have the chance, or I could wait for you. So we finished the book. It took us 2 years between ordering all the archive, processing all the pictures, and the texts, and putting everything in order, and then making the book. It was 2 years process all by myself. I was a graphic designer while I was studying, and that helped me to put the book together, both in terms of the texts and the graphic design of the book. But when I was working in the archive, I found out that he didn't have many texts other than description of project, but he had a lot of pictures that he took himself, and that were very inspiring, very silent language. These pictures are pictures of the river that he took in solitude. And the river in Buenos Aires is very special if you ever went there. The river is not a normal river. It doesn't have the other side. So everybody calls the sea, but it's not a sea, it's a river, and it's brown. Okay, and it's very quiet. You can't see almost move. So that fascinated Amancio all the time. So he has thousands of pictures of the river. It's very sort of meditative thing. The river doesn't change, the light changes very subtly, and he makes pictures and pictures and pictures of the river. Then he has pictures of the pampas. The same thing. I call in the text, I call the liquid pampas is the river, and the solid pampas is the pampas, you know? Because in a way it's the same thing. The river is actually dirt. You see it's brown, it's dirt. And pictures of the flooding of the pampas, because it's very flat. So one day he decided to do a house for his father, Alberto Williams. and they found a place. He found a very specific site, and the site had a little brook. For me, it was a surprise. He always was fascinated with the pampas, but suddenly he chose a place that is not flat. It has a little stream through it. But then I understood, because nobody told me anything, not even him, that in a way, what the house does is to bridge the gap of the two broken sides of nature. So actually what the building does is to reconcile the pampas with a horizontal plane, with two horizontal planes, one that is a bridge, the other one that is the top of the building. Also, he conceived it as three houses in a way, you know, the house underneath the bridge, the house in the bridge, and the house on top of the bridge. These are the plans. This is for you to understand his interest, that this was 1943-45. He sent this house, you could see here in the sketches, also his family, his mother, bringing the oranges, the same scene as always. And then he started looking at the shell of the bridge. He was fascinated with my art and things like that. And he actually destroyed two bridges that he built himself because they were not perfect. And this is Amancio at the end, very young, at the end of this process, looking back to nature with a sort of nostalgic, sentiment about being distant from nature, but being inspired by nature at the same time. So that's the house that became very famous. He presented this house to Le Corbusier. Le Corbusier was fascinated and wrote a very long article in a French magazine that brought Amancio to the attention of the world. And then later on, when Le Corbusier was commissioned to do the house in La Plata, in Buenos Aires, Le Corbusier commissioned Amancio Williams to be the person in charge of the final drawings and the construction. I will go very briefly to this. This is Alberto Williams playing his piano in the house that was designed for him. And the day I arrived to the house, many years later, and saw all the windows open in the corner, and we played the piano. Amancio or Alberto were not there. These are pictures by Amancio Williams. We realized that all Amancio wanted is to put Alberto Williams among the birds. The birds are the very strong inspiration of Alberto Williams' compositions, and he plays the many regions of Argentina through birds and through other elements of nature. So that's the house over the years with the brook and the very warm interiors. This differentiates very much from modern architecture. You know, you could see this, again, the family, the kind of warm feeling that is not very common. I mean, you don't see a picture like that of Bill Savoy or any of those. But, you know, the BKF chair, the disciples of Le Corbusier in Argentina, Ferran Verdoy, Kurchan, and Bonet, another exile from Catalonia. And then, you know, the tea, he was still very much an Englishman, and the oranges that his mother brought all the time to him, and the fire. Talking about the fire. Some years ago, the house was abandoned for many years, and suddenly fire erupted. It was occupied by people, and some people say it was generated because the owner wanted to get rid of it because it had a big debt, but the concrete structure survived. It initiated a process that I started being involved at the beginning, then I left it because the people involved didn't follow what the archive really expected. Anyway, they organized it through community participation and so on, and it's successful. It's going relatively well, not following exactly the restoration as it should be, but this is the state today. They are raising funds very slowly and so on, and the house is mostly back, not with the details provided by the archive. This is, again, very quickly, this is other projects, an airport for Buenos Aires that follow the master plan of Le Corbusier for Buenos Aires. But you see the section is always constant in his work. This is the first hanging office building in Buenos Aires that he was very upset with Foster and the Shanghai Bank. He actually wrote several articles saying that he literally copied. And if you look at it carefully, there's a lot of that. And this is 1946. That was never built. But suddenly he starts this exploration, 1939, 1952. He develops what he calls the shells of minimal thickness. It connects with many of the conversations we had before. This is a scale, 1 to 10 scale that he did himself and tested this shape that is not a hyper, as everybody was discussing. So it has a very unique shape that Amancio was very, very obsessed following, and had to do with the birds and so on. You could see it here in the different sections. So he tested that, and then he started a series of projects that go from 1954 for a gas station to large-scale schools and private housings, and then other complexes, 54, 61. He was, parallel to other projects, he was insisting on doing these shells, both individually or in groups, in joint groups. And then he changed scale, he continued with the high roofs idea, 1962, the cement factory in Cordoba, and then he continued with a project in Berlin for a church, 1964, with these high roofs. And then in 1963, he proposes for the 100th anniversary of his father, he proposes this monument for his father, which in a way synthesizes what he was looking at with the two structures. So here you will see the diagonal section and the cross section, and I will describe this in detail. He couldn't build this, obviously, because he had no clients for it, other than the desire to make an homage to his father. These, he said, were, the path to some kind of pathways in the park. But suddenly he gets a commission, a pavilion for an exhibition in 1966. And he adapts that shell structure to the side, and he puts another pavilion underneath for the actual exhibition. So this is an exhibition for a grains company, a food company that very important in Argentina, but they gave him 45 days to do the project and the construction. So these are some drawings from the archive, again, very silent. These are, some silos or birds places. And I realized that these, because it was about grains and containers and silos, these are, sections of silos, literally. And these are the sections. You will see the inverted foundations that were tested at that time, and here you can see a bigger version of that, and the rebar plans. Here is for you to understand the plan. The plan basically has two semi-cylinders, the two shells. It has a blue little pool in the middle, reunifying the two shells, and then it has a line here, which is a wall, a blue wall, that reunifies the two cylinders, and then it has another blue thing, which is this roof over here, that unifies the lower pavilion with the upper pavilion. So he always worked by two. He creates relationships by two, and he keeps growing them. So that's the upper part. So they went very fast, very complicated process that I will not describe in detail, but I will describe more in detail the one we follow. Scaffolding, formwork, they did a very artisanal method because they did with wax on top of the wood, the rebar, the construction almost finished. You can see there is no beams. All the forms are pure forms, minimal thicknesses. And as you can see, the form is very different to the one of the hypers because it doesn't have a line that divides the quadrants. Okay, there is never a line. It's a continuous surface. So he was fascinated with the idea of a continuous surface, and it's 9 centimeters thick, a little more in the center, and the water goes through the center. So this is the final result. You could see how one structure gets tangled with the other. I always say that it's almost like a tango because you have to fit the right foot in the other side and so on and follow the other. So this is part of the lower pavilion with the exhibition that was done with an artist, Marilu Marini, also joined him, and they did this dance by two, where he is photographing her during the opening. And you could see here, for instance, how she's pointing at and unifying both elements all the time. He was obsessed with this idea of two being reconciled. And here, finally, they meet in the basement. On top, with Marilu Marini again, they are looking nowhere, very abstract positions, but they are always two. And here they are always two. He takes this dance from below, going around, and suddenly it needs to be demolished. 30 days after, no more time, it needs to be demolished. He donates the work to the exhibition fair. They don't accept it. He donates it to the city. They don't accept it. He postponed the demolition many times. They demolished the lower part. Finally, they demolished the whole thing, and he makes this collage where he imagines it again in the Pampas with the blue sky. The blue, by the way, is the blue sky of Argentina. I found that in some of his writings. I did, when I come back from Germany, I had this idea of rebuilding this pavilion, and I started offering everywhere, and I did an action with students that I will go very quickly. We went to the site, that it's a different program right now, with archaeologists trying to find the foundations. We found that the foundations also were removed. There was no traces other than a little retaining wall over there, and we reconstructed the foundations with ice. This is Claudio Williams, his favorite song, and this got the attention of the press. The press, actually, one of the reporters reported that we found ice inside the earth. And the owner of the site came and said, "Why you didn't tell me that you found something?" Anyway, this is the next day. So next week, I am called by a group of a community group in the city of Vicente Lopez, and asked me if I want to work with them for a monument to the end of the millennium, because they needed to recover public space in that city. This is the Rio de la Plata, for you to understand. This is not how you see it in Google today. In Google today, you see all this blue, it's painted, okay? This is the reality. This is all brown, it comes all the way from Amazonia, and here it meets the Atlantic Ocean. This is the city of Buenos Aires, and that's Montevideo. This is 60 kilometers wide. That's why you don't see the other side of the river. And that's how it looks. What you see down here, and here starts the against idealism that I represent, okay? Because the idealism, the 1966, is gone. It's gone forever, possibly. And they represented that moment, and we don't represent that moment anymore. We deal with circumstances, and this is the circumstance that Amancio and the modern architects never faced or never wanted to face, and now we deal with it. What you see here, which sounds very good, is what's called the ecological reserve of Buenos Aires. This is a very long story. It has to do with the dictatorship, the 30,000 people killed by the dictatorship, and so on. This is a landfill to this site. This site was a beach in Buenos Aires that was landfilled with the demolition of houses during the World Cup 1978 and the disappearance of people. Many of the people killed during that process, the 30,000 people, are down there or in the river. So the river is very charged. The government of the dictatorial government of Argentina wanted to do in that landfill an island for the government. So the government was going to be in an island, separated from the city and the country. Very interesting idea. So this is the reality of the site, okay? Still today, you go to the site and you find this. This is a landfill done with, you know, everything that you could find at that time. Look at that. These are pictures that a friend of mine, phenomenal artist, Ricardo Badí, did of that situation at that time. And what was really interesting was that that place was the public space of the marginal people, the people that had no public space in the city. Okay, the people that didn't know, couldn't go anywhere. And the other thing is that the dictatorship prohibited the use of public space. If you had 3 people gathering, you could be arrested. Okay, more than 2 people was considered a public, you know, political meeting or something like that. So many people kind of retreated to that space because nobody went there. It was abandoned, the project failed, and the people were gathering there, you know, kids that don't have where to go, and very weird people. You know, I went there many times with my friend, and you found all these people that were like, the people excluded, you know, from the city. This is my friend Ricardo Badí. And also, it became a place for gays and transvestites that didn't have place because the dictatorship was persecuting them. So it was a very interesting place, and at the same time, you know, it was really against the grain. So I was called to put this, to possibly work in this place. This is a little bit the context of that time, and this is how it looks today. Still is called a beach. Barely could do anything there. The river is contaminated, fully contaminated. And that's the situation. They were making still more landfill now in democracy. But all this edge that was previously the public space and the beach was taken over by the military, and now is recovered by the government to create public space. So the people wanted a pointer in that public space. So we start, and so finally they convinced the mayor. The mayor was very happy because he was going to get all the votes of these community groups, and they gave me 45 days to make a project and build the structure. So we went ahead very quickly with engineer Tomás del Carril. We took all the plans, scanned them, recalculated all the structure, made some adjustments, many adjustments, because this was going to be in front of the river. There are severe winds over there. And basically, the most difficult thing was that we couldn't do the same construction method of that time. It was impossible. We didn't have the people to do it, but we didn't have the technology to do it this time as well. They gave us $100,000, which is nothing. But we accepted it. The company accepted it. The company hired a group of people coming from Paraguay that barely spoke Spanish. They spoke mainly Guarani. And I had my collaborator at that time, Georg Poncelar, coming from Germany, who was an engineer and he was an engineer and carpenter. And we devised a different way of doing it with the available resources we had. We made, and I will explain, it's 5 degrees ribs and a surface of plywood. So we made this big model to understand exactly the shape. And as we were calculating, the construction started. So this is the site. Here you could see the machines already making holes to test the soil while the machines were landfilling at the same time. Completely anti-idealistic conditions. Can you see it here? So as we were making holes, things like this appeared, you know? Or our workers were eating fish from the river that was contaminated. We tried to prevent, but everything was going very fast, and the group was supporting, and the mayor was very insistent, and we accepted the challenge. So those are the very sophisticated tools we had to measure. Do you take it or you leave it? Look at we made the holes for the foundations much bigger for safety because the engineer was very doubtful about that. And look at how they, everything broke down, even the machines. So that was the result. We had to carry everything by hand. And that was the group of people we had. And we couldn't do the inverted foundations. We started building the scaffolding. That was the only sophisticated thing we used. We used bedding that were available. And one night, because we were working day and night, one night at 10 p.m. I saw the Suestada, the southeastern wind, coming, and I called everybody to go down. I was up there, and the whole structure collapsed, and nobody was hurt. And it was because the construction company, who was at risk completely with very low budget, didn't put the crossings to support the structure on time. So we started again. We lost 1 week, and the time frame was still the same. So this is what we did. With the wood we had, we drew the sections every 5 degrees, put it on the table, and the guys were tracing it with wood. Put it here on the shoulders and bring it up there. That's me in the background, if you can see. And we used a very thin plywood that worked very nicely. We put the rebar. The crew, very proud of the work. That's the capital that was stainless steel, as it was proposed by Mr. Williams. And suddenly, one day after we poured the concrete, like very few days after we poured the concrete, I see that the constructor already pushed down the formwork. And I say, what did you do? Because this is due next week. And he said, the contract says that I will get paid when I push down the formwork. And I said, you are at the risk of losing the whole thing. Anyway, it worked. Those are the 9 centimeters. And those are still the conditions, and because we were looking at Candela very closely, we brought all the crew up there and tested it. And then I asked them to leave for a moment, smoke a cigar, and have my own time. So it was open. It was very successful. The community loved it, embraced it. All sorts of festivals and things happened there. So the mayor was re-elected, and it was amazing. So immediately the mayor asked me to continue this project. This is the opening. Of course, in the opening it rained, as in any opening, it rained, but we had umbrellas. So, and we planted with Lucia Pietra, we planted the original plants of the Rio de la Plata that started growing, which is called pajarabas. And all sorts of activities, aerial activities started happening there, and also love activities, like they happen here in the Unam, where everybody's kissing each other on the ground. And we started very quickly. He gave me 9 months to make a 1 kilometer park. That was the situation. Here you will see the umbrellas. And we started working the next day. And I will not go into this project, but just to tell you that we spent $1 million there for 1 kilometer park. That was absolutely nothing. And this is taken from an airplane arriving to Buenos Aires, a very large project, but that's the result. Finally, the umbrellas were, grounded on another project that took on, expanding the public space for the people. And one day I could tell you more about this project. The second project, and this is faster, if it is too late.
15 minutes over.
All right. Amancio Williams, once he did the umbrellas individually, he wanted to do the big surface, which was a further challenge. He created this project in 1948 for the government of Peron. Obviously, he was not a Peronist, but lost the project, therefore. For 3 hospitals in a tropical area of Argentina. But his big challenge, this is Amancio Williams, was to make a double roof, the lower pavilion for the hospital and the upper pavilion to prevent the sun and the rain. Those were the perspectives. And the very interesting point was the continuous surface with the same section and openings here and there. He did another project in a different version, grouping but not melting the surface for this sanctuary of Our Lady of Fatima in Pilar. And suddenly I'm commissioned to do a public space for the city of Santa Fe, in the province of Santa Fe in Argentina, for what's called the cultural factory, the Mill Cultural Factory of Santa Fe. Basically a big public space for events before a cultural center. I proposed the continuous surface, they didn't accept it because they had very little time and money, and we accepted. We put 13 pieces, as you can see in the model, on top of that public space that will become the link between 2 very busy streets in a place that was originally silos, and it's called El Molino. That was a big company related to the previous one of the exhibition company. So we went very fast, but we had to change the construction method again because we couldn't do it artisanally as we did it before. These are some of the perspectives. We did it with the municipality, and we wanted to get as close as possible to the continuous surface. What we devised with the company, we didn't work very well with the company this time because it was far away. I was already in Arizona for 2 years or 8 years. Was this fiberglass mold that formwork in quadrants that will be deployed and pushed forward as we build. This was good, except that the form was not followed exactly, and it marked the edges, but we made it anyway because the construction already started when we were doing the drawings. So here you could see how there is a little problem in the form, but we couldn't fix it. This is the governor. We work very closely with the governor. It's a socialist party that still governs the province of Santa Fe. And the rebar with the same engineers, a little more sophisticated formwork, not only formwork but scaffolding, because we had to push the formwork from one to another. We had only 2 of those, and we had to build 13. I was a little overweight in that picture. So the first one didn't come out very well, but we had to leave it. There was no chance to redo it. And we kept pushing forward. There were nice dialogues, sort of opera style between the old silos and the umbrellas. And we made it in time again. So the building and the public space was open in time with a big celebration, and today it's a very, very successful space. The column is 12 meters tall. The side of the umbrellas is 9 meters. Amancio developed umbrellas for 9 meters, 11 meters, and 13 meters. We used the 9 meters that we already tested. You can see the first one was not too good, but still is quite acceptable. The space is phenomenal. Santa Fe is a very, very hot city. And when you are on the top, which you have the chance in the building to see this, you see the continuous surface. But it's not ideal. So this is the opening. And you could go anytime there. I challenge you. It's a very, very active space. The city put these lights later on that change colors. We didn't like it, but it doesn't matter. It's not anymore ours. It's the people's place. This is a picture I received last week from above. And this is how the building works. It's a very active place where people produce stuff. The neighbors go and produce stuff instead of receiving culture. And, you know, this is very much what is meant to be, buildings and people. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudio. Very poetic shell builder. Thanks once again. So last speaker for today was Claudio, and now I would like to invite all the speakers of the afternoon session to the round table here in front, and then we will open the round table for questions.
Well, thank you very much for the presentations. And I just wanted to point out two things. The first one is that at the beginning I made a 1 kilometer mistake because the Sahanblatt is 1 kilometer from Alexanderplatz in the Berliner Bezirk-Mitte and the Graudenstraße, aka Fischeritze. That's the first thing. And the second one is about the Hyperschale that Tanya showed us and the restoration works. The information I got from a film about the students' competition to make something with the Hyperschale. I think you were in the presentation, or you were present here when I spoke the first day. Tanya? You were here. Yes, because I spoke about the competition of students' competition from students from the University of Rosenheim and the University of Magdeburg.
Yes,
maybe it was that was some attempts to save the building, but the final one is the one you show us. No? So it is. I just wanted to clarify that. Yeah? But I think the project they are very well-known architects. They are very good architects, so I'm sure the project is very good, and I hope to have the possibility to visit the building in the future. Okay, those were those two things.
Thank you. More questions? A lady in the evening, but come on.
Okay, again, congratulations for all the speakers. I want to ask Claudia about these shells. The first projects by Amancio Williams was from 1949,
Yes,
in the same curved edge.
yes.
Yes,
It was always exactly the same.
okay, and the idea is to, it was high and the hospitals were below. It's only for give shadow.
So it's only for shade, because I mean, the province of Corrientes, yeah,
Because
the province of Corrientes is it's a subtropical, but it has a lot of rain and a lot of sun. So it's a very unbearable, climate. And in fact, the building that was built at the end, that was a very poor building, and it's nothing to do with this. It had a double roof as well. It's something that is going to be good for this climate. So it was just applying its idea in this new version, which is to continue service.
have you noticed about which one was the influence in this idea, or where
It was very difficult to trace. I really looked for it, and it's because it has some connections, obviously, to many of the things that we have seen during these days, but it's not exactly the same. And I couldn't find any traceable relationship other than his inspiration with birds and a very kind of ideal version of that. It is in the modular 2 by Le Corbusier. Le Corbusier published this section in the modular 2. Because Amancio Williams worked, fanatically with Corpus principles, and especially the modular, it's all regulated on the modular. For instance, the distance between the two umbrellas in the multi-born pavilion is 1.13 meters, which is half of modular, and so on. I mean, you could trace everything to the modular, and Le Corbusier was very happy about that, and he showed it as one application of the modular. But if you really follow the modular, you don't get it. It's like you could reverse engineer and see that the modular is applied, but there is nothing about the modular with the shape. The other thing is, when we put it to the engineers today, and with the computer, we had these plans that were just numbers. It was a table of numbers with 4 digits after the comma. They couldn't quite figure out the formula complete. I mean, they had to write all these numbers to figure out the formula, but we couldn't find the formula anywhere. So it was very, and they were like completely astonished about the development of the form, because it comes from nowhere. I mean, obviously he has a reason, but he was very secretive about it.
I was in Santa Fe 6 years ago with, maybe you know, Luis Müller.
Yes, Müller, for sure.
Yes, and he took me to this beautiful place, and we enjoyed it a lot. And we seen in this sótano, in
the basement,
the scaffolding, or how do you?
Oh, the formwork?
The formwork is glass fiber.
Yeah, that's right.
And you made one, and
No, we made 2 sets. There were 8 pieces.
Okay.
Actually. So we were moving by 2.
2 by 2.
For the last
And by 13.
It was because it fit well.
Okay.
No, it was because it fit well. Actually, we started with the shape. First, there was Mario Correa, Mario Correa Yellow was involved in the project, but he let me do the Amancio Williams part. First, he thought that putting them, in an orthogonal way to the buildings was going to be better. But Amancio always wanted to see these umbrellas in a diagonal way and walk around them. So we put them diagonally to face the streets and create more dynamics for the people. And after we put them, and they fit perfectly well, like incredibly well, 13 was the number. That was
Very
it.
beautiful
I like very much your presentation, and I have a question of, did you know if there any document about the constructive method to restore the concrete shells that you previously mentioned, or is there any article or publication about the techniques of maintenance?
Which
Oh, of any of those, there's some article with constructive method or restore, or is there information of what do they do to these buildings?
I can't give you a clear answer, no. It would be better to ask her. She knows better.
For anybody else.
I just took photographs of a lot of the buildings. I'm not that much interested in the real tough technique, you know. I love the results.
Yes, I worked of the destiny of the Müther shells and what become now of them and how they may be restored. And you can read it in this book of mine. I brought it as a little souvenir to everyone who wants to write postcards. And yeah, it's so I worked for several buildings of Müther which were restored in the recent years, but some of them are still in danger, but in the recent years the process was ongoing to yes. What I wanted to point out with my presentation was that the appreciation of the buildings below, and that the citizens who live with shells, it's a little bit to what you've done to rebuild them. If you're not going to do it by yourself to save the shells, you will not have any effort, because the government is never going to make this by its own. You always have to do it from the citizens' point of view. So it was the kind of most of the shells in Müther.
I have a follow-up question related to the conservation of shells. And do you have programs for concrete conservation, or how do people acquire the skill to, not the technical or historic knowledge about the shells, but the actual concrete intervention when it comes to conservation?
Was it for me?
Or anybody and everybody, because this is a problem we're facing in Mexico. Is that we have a great deterioration, as we've all seen, and there's very elaborate historical documentation. There's appreciation, there's value, but we do have a lack of being able to intervene in concrete conservation. In general, there's not a lot of concrete conservators in the world, and there's a lot of different variables involved when it comes to not just material but also environment. And so I'm interested in knowing if there's strategies in other countries that could be of use to us.
Did I really understand? You mean the techniques of making the concrete, or
Of conserving, of intervening in historic buildings with conservation qualities.
Okay.
Maybe the answer is there.
One very nice example might be the structural restoration of the petrol station in Meetimg in Switzerland, which was done a few years ago, and which is documented very well. So we could just
link towards a book, but that's not on shells, that's on the restoration of an old bridge built 90 years ago by Versailles in Switzerland, which now has been totally restored. They first wanted to demolish the bridge, but now it has been restored by your concert. And I accompanied these works during the last year. And this is also a book that is available, and there are lots of technical details in it, how they've done the conservation of broken parts of the concrete of that bridge.
If I could say something about that, you probably anticipate my answer, but following what she was saying, is that the most difficult conservation or restoration is the social bonds, you know, and concrete, by fortune, resists a lot of damage. You just need to prevent the water to come in and, start the oxidation of the river and, so on. But you see, the house over the brook, under fire, cracks, water going through for years, and the structure is there. It could be very easy to repair. But what's not easy to repair is the social bonds that could make that happen. And so, the structures of concrete, by fortune, could resist a lot. But we need to work on the other side, because without the other side, we don't get to repair.
I have a little question for Wilfred. In your presentation, all photos is taken by you?
All photographs taken by me, yes.
Oh, it's really nice.
When I was in Germany, I heard many lectures from Professor Judith, and he never mentioned Vladimir Zhukov. He never mentioned Ulrich Müther. About in 82, more or less, 1982, suddenly Vladimir Zhukov was discovered. And then there was many information, started to flow the information about Vladimir Zhukov. And in February 2005, a German lady came to the university named Margaret Fuchs. And then she brought the film from Ulrich Müther. She wanted to talk with me, and then I saw how important was the work from Ulrich Müther. And then we discovered, at least in Mexico, that Ulrich Müther was there. He was still alive at the time, because he died in 2007.
Yeah, I need to go with
It was in 2005. 2005. And now with this meeting, at least me, I have discovered Williams, Numaji, or and so there are many shell heroes on the world that maybe we still don't know, but I'm happy that at least with this meeting we know more about them. So it was very nice meeting in this direction.
I saw in internet a lot of shells in the side of the Soviet Union, especially in Poland, and do you know some shells in Poland, Hungary, Bulgaria?
Maybe the same problem than I have tried to declare together with Ulrich Müther. We didn't know anything about him, and as well we don't know anything about what's going on in Azerbaijan, in Russia, in Poland, and wherever. We didn't even acknowledge it.
No questions for Marcos or Ego?
I think we are very tired.
Everything said.
Too intense
Everything said.
Everything said. Okay, like always. Okay, then I think we close down the round table. If there are no questions anymore,
We have
I hand over the mic.
we have a Hector
Yes.
Ferreira.
We having a closing session now.
Now we have the closing session. I asked Rainer and Matthias and Hector Ferreiro, Chief of the CAD, División de Educación Continua y Actualización Docente.
I am the architect Hector Ferreiro, head of the Division of Continuing Education of the Faculty of Architecture. And I'm going to tell you that a few moments ago, I asked Dino del Cueto how the symposium works were going. And believe me, I saw him very happy, very happy. A success, he told me. For us at the faculty, it has been a pleasure to welcome all of you, members of the Candela Group, Müther Group, and Isler Group. I want to tell you that Dino has paid special attention to the organization of the symposium, developing, as you know, 4 days of important complementary activities, such visiting the exhibition of Zaha Hadid works in MAC, and also visiting extraordinary buildings for us in Mexico, as Los Manantiales, the Chapel of the Altillo, San Antonio de las Huertas, el Palacio de los Deportes, among others, as well as 2 days of discussion sessions, which ends today, enriched with the experiences of you, the participating lecturers. I'm sorry, my English is not as good as I would like. We hope that for all of you, your stay in Mexico has been very profitable to achieve this exchange of knowledge and experiences that allow us to continue working on the study, evolution, and present and future development of concrete shells. Recognized, I guess so, as one of the most interesting structures in the world. Now the symposium ends, but we want to take the advantage of the moment to begin with our gratitude, a recognition to our visiting professors, and I will ask Dino and to accompany me to deliver them in this moment. This recognition is, of course, a very important document for us here at the university, and we want to deliver now to all the visiting professors, and after the next day, you have to tomorrow one more visit, and then we will deliver the rest of these recognitions. Okay, Dino, if you want to help me, of course, the professor here at the table. I want to ask him to deliver these recognitions.
Okay, we will give this reconocimiento. I will read, it's in Spanish. La Facultad de Arquitectura de la Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México, a través de su División de Educación Continua y Actualización Docente, en colaboración con el Centro de Investigaciones en Arquitectura, Urbanismo y Paisaje, CIAUFA, otorga el presente reconocimiento a, ahora no va a decir el número, así, por su participación como ponente en el Cimis Cdmx 2018, Candela-Isler-Müther International Symposium, First Meeting, Mexico City, 12-18, del 17 al 22 de noviembre de 2018, Por mi raza, hablar el espíritu, Ciudad Universitaria, Ciudad de México, noviembre de 2018, y con la firma del maestro en arquitectura Marcos Masari, director de la Facultad de Arquitectura, el doctor en arquitectura Juan Ignacio del Coto Ruiz Funes, coordinador del Centro de Investigaciones en Arquitectura, Urbanismo y Paisaje, y el arquitecto Héctor Alfonso Ferreiro León, jefe de la División de Educación Continua y Actualización Docente. We will give this reconocimiento, recognition, with a poster of a souvenir of the Cimis, this one. But we have only 10, then Matthias and Rainer have a lot. It's only for the visitors, los reconocimientos para los locales, nos los entregarán en días próximos.
Well, representing the Dean of the Faculty of our of Architecture, Marcos Masari. Finally, we wish you in the morning visit of tomorrow, continuing enjoying the architecture of our country, and we hope to see you soon again. Thank you very much.